Hello, beautiful souls. Welcome back to my channel. I know it's been about 2 days since I last posted. With the whole festive season with Deepavali, it has been, quite full on our end. So that's why I thought today I have to do a video. And with the new moon season and all that, I thought this would be the most perfect topic to go with. So, today's teaching is one that many of you have felt but may not have been able to name. The moment our beloved divine masculine reaches the edge of himself. So that's why this discourse is titled The Ego's Last Stand, the divine masculine's rebirth. So it's about that threshold between collapse and resurrection, right? When the masculine energy can no longer survive on false identity and the soul begins its ultimate correction. So, this is not a story of failure, it is the rite of passage every divine masculine must face before he can truly embody love, integrity, and higher service. So, let's talk about the old paradigm of masculinity, that was built on survival, which is the shifting sense of masculinity. It told men that strength meant suppression, that leadership meant control, that love was weakness. This conditioning has existed for thousands and thousands of years and has become embedded in the human psyche as the masculine principle fell out of alignment with the divine. So when our beloved divine masculine awakens, he begins to feel the discomfort of this split. Our divine masculine may not have the language for it, but he senses that way he has been living, striving, achieving, proving no longer works. Relationships feel hollow, achievements lose meaning. He senses something is missing, but he doesn't yet know it himself. So that's why, as divine feminines, we'll notice it in subtle ways. Emotional shutdowns after intimacy, irritation when confronted with love. That's why the whole projection of I'm not interested after spending a lot of time, right? And a tendency to sabotage peace when it finally arrives. These aren't flaws. They are symptoms of the ego gripping tighter as the higher self pushes for emergence. So every soul destined for divine union will experience what, mystics we call the dark night. For our beloved divine masculine, this can look like breakdowns, withdrawals, and unexpected explosions of anger and despair. It's his ego's last desperate attempt to maintain control. The rumble before renewal, where our divine masculine fights invisible battles, the fear of being seen, the terror of surrendering, the inherited voice of his father saying, real men don't cry. But here's the truth. The pain our divine masculine feels isn't punishment. It is purification. It is the soul's signal that outdated constructs are dying. So when we see our divine masculine push us away, remember, resistance is often recognition in disguise. Our divine masculine's ego senses what his heart already knows, that we are the portal, we are the reason to his evolution. So that's when the dark night of the masculine soul comes in, right? So the dark night is not an event, because as divine feminines, we have been through the dark night of the soul countless times. So the dark night of the soul, it's dismantling. Our divine masculine begins to question everything: his career, his worth, his beliefs about love. Sometimes he loses the very things he thought defined him. This is when most divine masculines retreat. They numb, they distract, they rationalize, but underneath that avoidance is sacred terror. the awareness that something divine is calling him and the human shell is too small to contain it. And this is when many of us divine feminines misinterpret this withdrawal as rejection. But it's not that our divine masculine doesn't care. It's that he's meeting his shadow. He's confronting centuries of patriarchal trauma, ancestral burden, and unprocessed grief. And he's being invited to feel, maybe even for the first time, and feeling for him, that's resurrection. So, when the pressure becomes unbearable, the ego begins to crack. And this is the point where he may say things that sound cruel, not because he means them, but because his whole identity is dying. The words, I'm not interested, leave me alone, or I can't do this, go away, I never, ever, 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 ever want to talk to you again, are sometimes the ego's final shield before surrender. What follows? What follows? This is something you guys have to pay attention to. What follows is sacred dismantling. He may isolate, he may lose motivation, he may even feel like a stranger in his own body. But this is when our role as the divine feminine becomes crucial, not to fix, but to witness, because our steady resonance of truth becomes the womb through which his rebirth occurs. So practically, this stage asks both, us, the divine feminines, and divine masculines to practice mindful detachment. So stop reacting, start observing. Inner inquiry, ask who is the one resisting, and surrender. Allow the unraveling without judgment. So ego death is messy, but every death is a womb in disguise. So this is when the power of surrender comes in. You see, surrender is not weakness. It's the highest masculine act of power. To surrender means to align with truth, not to collapse into defeat. In surrender, the divine masculine stops fighting what is and begins flowing with what wants to be. And this is when his emotional body begins to thaw. He cries, he prays, he admits his longing, and in that vulnerability, he meets divinity. So that's why our divine masculine, when he starts surrendering, the surrender becomes unstoppable because he's no longer led by fear, but led by consciousness itself. So this is when our divine masculine learns that real protection is not an armor, it's presence. Real power is not dominance, it's devotion. So this is when the new divine masculine learns to lead with awareness, not ego. He begins to integrate emotion as wisdom, not weakness. He understands that emotional intelligence is spiritual intelligence in motion. This is when our divine masculines, they start to listen instead of reacting. He starts to feel instead of fleeing, and he expresses instead of exploding. Through this, as the divine feminine, we no longer feel we must mother him, even though that's what we feel all the time, right? That we need to take care of him, that we need to mother him, we need to wake him up, blah, 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 and so forth. But this is when we can truly meet our divine masculine, because our connection evolves from polarity into partnership, from chasing to co-creation. And this reclamation heals the planet's masculine wound. Every man who learns to love consciously shifts the collective frequency. So when the ego dissolves, a new energy arises, right? The calm, clear, compassionate. And this is the dawn of divine consciousness within our beloved divine masculine. This is when he begins to live by intuition rather than impulse. He no longer asks, what do I get? But what am I here to give? His actions align with service, integrity, and higher love. And the new divine masculine is not perfect, he's present. He honors the divine feminine, not from guilt but from reverence, and he becomes a channel for divine order, balancing strength with sensitivity, with wisdom. And in this balance, union becomes inevitable. So remember, rebirth isn't a single awakening. It's a lifestyle. To sustain it, our divine masculine must anchor new practices like stillness, moments of daily silence to listen within, reflection, journaling, embodiment, grounding spirituality into practical action, compassion at work, honesty in love with his divine feminine, and accountability in communication. Right? These practices weave heaven into earth, and they ensure that the new divine masculine, the awakening divine masculine, the stable divine masculine doesn't revert to old patterns but becomes a living bridge between consciousness and creation. So there's always a ripple effect to all of this. When one divine masculine awakens, thousands feel the vibration, because the masculine collective is interconnected. Every act of self-awareness sends ripples through ancestral lines, clearing density from generations. That's why our divine masculine's healing allows his father to soften, sons to open, brothers to forgive. It gives permission to every woman to rest in a radiance, no longer carrying the burden of holding the world together alone. This is the quiet revolution, the rebirth of divine balance on earth. So that's why it's so crucial, to understand that it is such an important part. So that's why as we go on to part 2, we are going to go inside the alchemical process that begins once the ego's final fortress falls. So what happens in the stillness after the storm? And how does the divine masculine begin to remember himself as a soul, not a persona? So in part 1, it was about the fall. So now it's about the rise. It's not the rise of the ego, it's the rise of consciousness, and this resurrection is quieter, slower, and holier than the masculine mind could ever imagine. So when the ego dies, the silence that follows can feel unbearable. There is no drama left to hide behind, no chase to distract the pain, no illusion of control to soothe the uncertainty. In this silence, our beloved divine masculine meets his emptiness, and for a moment, he believes something has gone wrong. But this is the sacred void, the womb space where new consciousness begins forming. And during this stage, he may feel emotionally flat or disoriented. He may notice the things that once excited him, victories, the validations, the pursuit of status, now ring hollow. So he might even grieve who he thought he was, and the grief is necessary. It's the price of awakening, right? Because identity that dies was never truly him, it was the armor. So the void is the temple no one talks about. And this is when the divine masculine learns non-doing. For lifetimes, our divine masculines are conditioned to build, fix, conquer. Now the universe asks him to sit still, naked, unproductive, and simply be. And he will fight this. At first, he will try to turn even his healing into a performance, journaling to feel productive, meditating to get results. But the void strips away even the spiritual ego. He begins to realize that awakening isn't something we just achieve. It's what's left when we stop achieving. And here's that masculine, it's here that the masculine principle begins to merge with the feminine, receptivity, surrender, and intuition. And this is when our divine masculine stops chasing the light and allows the light to rise from within. So this is the part, the resurrection doesn't happen in a temple. It happens in ordinary life. The universe humbles our beloved divine masculine through daily lessons. A job loss that teaches trust, a heartbreak that teaches surrender, a quiet morning that teaches him to listen. And these are not punishments, these are refinements. They tend to strip our divine masculines down until all that remains is essence. So for the first time he begins to see himself clearly. He notices how often he operated from a fear of rejection, how deeply he equated worth with usefulness, and how much he feared being still. And then he laughs because he realizes that love never required any of that. So every divine masculine's resurrection is catalyzed by a divine feminine who dared to stand in truth. Our boundary becomes our divine masculine's mirror. Our silence becomes his intuition, and our self-respect becomes his roadmap home. And that's why when we stop rescuing our divine masculine, we give him the chance to rescue himself. When we stop performing for his love, we have forced him to meet the divine mirror, his own capacity to love without control. You see where I'm coming from? You see, as the divine feminine, our role is not to save our divine masculine. Our role is just to remember our divine masculine, and that remembrance calls him into coherence. So that's why when we choose our own divinity, the masculine doesn't lose us. He meets us where we always were, in the frequency of truth. So you may be asking, the inner union within him. What's up with the inner union? As he sheds his old pattern, the divine masculine begins to discover his own gentleness, his intuition that once he suppressed, he starts to feel again. He cries without shame, he prays without pride, and he feels the heartbeat of earth and realizes he has never been separate from us. You see, that's the resurrection, the return of emotion, empathy, and surrender, not as weakness, but as divine intelligence. Our divine masculine no longer fear his sensitivity, honors it. He no longer hides from intimacy, he welcomes it. He no longer sees us, the divine feminine, as a mystery to conquer, but as a mirror to merge with. So one of the greatest shifts in a resurrected masculine is the movement from logic to logos, from rational mind to divine word. He no longer lives by mental calculation, he lives by alignment. He no longer asks what's practical, but what's true. And this is when his intuition activates. Our divine masculine begins receiving inner guidance, dreams, synchronicities, and the same divine masculine once rolled his eyes at spirituality now hears his soul speak in symbols, numbers, and signs. He understands now that logic serves the mind, but logos serves the soul. And through this inner communication, he begins to live as a conscious instrument of divine will. So at this point, you might probably be wondering, oh boy, this is so deep, right? So that's when we return to purpose, right? When the ego dies, purpose doesn't vanish, it purifies. No longer about recognition or profit, but our divine masculine's mission becomes an act of service, where he wants to create things that heal, protect, and restore balance. So whether he's an engineer, artist, father, or teacher, his work becomes prayer. Every action becomes a transmission of divine order, and this is the essence of sacred masculinity, directed energy from flow that flows from love, not fear. And when our divine masculine operates from this place, abundance returns effortlessly because he's no longer chasing it. So that's why you have to see our divine masculine, the new masculine. In love, the new masculine no longer runs from depth. He invites it. He communicates openly. He doesn't hide behind logic or pride. He admits when he's wrong because truth matters more than being right. So the divine feminine, this is the moment when we start to feel our divine masculine's part of the soul, not just his body, not just his mind, but the living consciousness that's always loved, you know, us, the divine feminine, beyond time. And that's when our divine masculine leads not by dominance, but by devotion. He protects, not, he protects not by control but by consciousness, and this alignment becomes a sacred technology field that births higher realities. So this personal rebirth is actually planetary significance. As more and more divine masculines awaken, the energetic infrastructure of earth shifts. Patriarchal systems begin to collapse because they no longer find resonance. New systems emerge founded on corruption, compassion, and divine covenants, So that's why the masculine principle reclaims its original role to protect creation, not possess it, to serve truth, not manipulate it, to embody love and not to avoid it. So every awakening masculine is a stabilizing pillar for new earth frequency, a lighthouse guiding humanity back to balance. So, our role as the divine feminines, watching this unfold, our invitation is to witness our divine masculine's evolution and collapsing into impatience. So, this divine masculine's rebirth takes time. It's not linear, it's not visible. Sometimes his silence is prayer, sometimes his distance is digestion, sometimes his detour is divine. So that's why when we, as the divine feminines, hold our resonance, we anchor the field that makes resurrection sustainable. Because every time we chose peace or panic, the communication, we communicate, I trust your soul more than I fear your process, and that trust becomes medicine for our divine masculine. So, as the divine masculine resurrects, and as the divine feminines, we remain anchored in self love, our energies begin to merge again, not through pursuit, but through coherence. And this is when Monadic twin flame union begins, when both divine feminine and divine masculines stand in equal light, embodying their divine blueprints fully. This connection becomes an electromagnetic field of remembrance, a living template for divine partnership on earth. They no longer meet to complete each other, they meet to create together, and the love becomes a frequency that heals timelines, activates planetary grids, and births collective awakening. So that's why the reborn masculine is no longer afraid of us. He becomes it, right? He is no longer afraid of the flame because he's become it, and he recognizes the flame in us. He realizes that the fire that once burned him was never punishment, it was purification, and now he stands unafraid in its light. So he can hold intensity without collapsing, love without losing him, and lead without ego. And our divine masculine's energy becomes stable, grounded, trustworthy, and the kind of masculine presence that brings safety just by existing. And this is what the world has been waiting for, not the old archetype of the hero, but the new archetype of the spiritual man, one who walks in love, not in power. So, our divine masculine's resurrection isn't just his story, it's humanity's. For millennia, we have lived under imbalance. Now the scales are returning to harmony. Every man who learns to cry heals his lineage. Every woman who stops mothering the wounded masculine heals hers. Every union that rises in truth becomes a doorway through which heaven re-enters earth. So, if you're witnessing your divine masculine is ego's last stand, hold the vision. Don't fix, don't chase, don't fool. Simply see as the divine being he's becoming. Because when he finally emerges, he will not be the man who left you. He will be the king who remembers you and returns. So I know this is a lot to take in. So take a deep breath. Place your hand over your heart and feel your divine masculine coming to you, calm, clear, and alive. And this is the resurrection frequency. And this is what union feels like, the meeting of heaven and earth, within and outside. So, again, guys, If this teaching resonated with you and you want to work one-on-one with me, you can book a session via the link provided in the description. You can go to my website for all my other services, and all my sessions are conducted via video call, one-on-one, live by me because you guys always ask me these questions. It's conducted by me live through Zoom, so you can ask me all the questions you want during our session. All right, with that, remember, the journey doesn't end with our divine masculine's rebirth. It continues forevermore. All right, with that, I hope you have enjoyed this discourse. And you know, there is like so much to talk about, so much to share. And at this point, you guys are probably thinking, wow, there is like so much coming in. That's why I'm contemplating, should I do part 3 now, or should I just do it in another discourse, because it's already 25 minutes. But you know what, I'll just wrap it up. All right, so now we're in the final third part, the last part of our discourse, the return of the sacred king. So this is not about crowns or thrones. This is about embodiment, the moment when our divine masculine stands fully in his higher self, no longer running from the light within him. He no longer seeks validation from the world because he's become a reflection of the divine order itself. This is where consciousness takes form, where love becomes leadership, when our divine masculine becomes the mission. So after resurrection comes application, right? The inner work is done, the forgiveness, the stillness, the surrender must now flow into action. But here's the key. He no longer acts from willpower, he acts from alignment. So that's the difference, right? Our divine masculine's choices are no longer motivated by fear of loss or desire for validation, but by service to truth. Our divine masculine begins to feel a divine responsibility, not the old burden of proving himself, but the sacred call to embody his soul's integrity in everything he touches. That's why in his relationships with us, he becomes consistent. In his work, he becomes more ethical. In his presence, he becomes peace itself. The sacred king doesn't command loyalty, inspires it by frequency. So what is the restoration of the masculine archetype? So humanity has long suffered from the distorted masculine archetypes, right? The tyrant, the martyr, the avoidant, the addict, the controller. Each of these distortions was born from separation from us, his divine feminine, right? Now through this rebirth, the divine masculine reclaims his original design, the protector, not through dominance but through consciousness, the builder, not of empires but of harmony, the lover, not of bodies but of truth. This is the return of the sacred king, our beloved divine masculine, the man whose authority is rooted in empathy, whose strength is measured by gentleness, and whose purpose is guided by cosmic consciousness. So you will know this, when you see your DM again, if you're in separation, or if you've just united recently, because the room will feel lighter, clearer when your divine masculine walks in. So how do we feel when our divine masculine return? When the divine masculine steps into his true essence, we feel it as divine feminines, before we see it, right? So the energy that once felt chaotic now feels grounded. His silence, once confusing, now radiates peace, and his presence, once inconsistent, now carries stability. This is when our nervous system relaxes, our heart reopens, because deep down we always knew this man existed. We just needed to give him the space to become him. So that's why in this phase, as the divine feminine, we experience what I call the still flame effect. Our energy begins harmonizing with our divine masculine's upgraded frequency without needing to chase or compensate. This is where the third energy field stabilizes and union begins translating into the physical dimension. So before awakening, our beloved divine masculine's relationship with power was external: achievement, success, control, money. After resurrection, it becomes internal self-mastery, integrity, and presence. Our divine masculine now understands that power isn't about having influence over others, but resonance with truth. He stops performing for respect because his authenticity commands it naturally. So this is when our divine masculine no longer fears losing people, because he knows that love cannot be lost, only misaligned. And this freedom allows him to love us, his divine feminine, without attachment, jealousy, or domination. This is when our divine masculine no longer projects his fear onto us, because he sees us as his divine equal. And together we rise, not as half seeking completion, but as whole beings amplifying each other's missions. And this stage of the journey reveals a deeper truth. Divine partnership isn't about romance alone. Romance is there, but it's about resonance. So it goes like this, divine masculine is the sacred king, and then we are the awakened queen. But we are not defined by titles. We are the custodians of this energy, and our union becomes a frequency field, a living blueprint of divine harmony. Every word we speak, every touch we share, every project that we co-create ripples out to awaken others. And this is what twin flame union was always meant to be, not just emotional reconciliation, but planetary recalibration. And the world changes through our embodiment. And that's why, as we live our love, with integrity, we reprogram humanity, reprogram what humanity believes love can be. And that's when our divine masculine's relationship with the divine intensifies. One of the most beautiful aspects of this stage is our divine masculine's reconnection with God directly. In the early journey, many men seek God through the feminine, because we embody cosmic consciousness to them. But in his resurrection, he begins to commune with cosmic consciousness personally. He prays not to ask, but to align. He meditates not to escape, but to integrate. And he no longer fears silence, he thrives in it. And that's when our divine masculine's relationship with God becomes grounded and real. And from this connection flows true leadership, because only a man anchored in God can lead without ego. And this is when he heals the father line too. As the divine masculine reclaims his light, he naturally begins healing his ancestral masculine line. He forgives his father, not because the pain didn't matter, but because he now sees the pattern with compassion. He understands the generations of men before him were never shown emotional safety or spiritual worth. Now, through awareness, he ends the cycle. He becomes the father archetype reborn, capable of nurturing without controlling, guiding without dominating, loving without withholding. So every child he touches, every mentee he guides, every individual he inspires, every soul he touches, every colleague he touches, every friend he touches, feels the shift, because he no longer passes on fear, he passes on consciousness. And this is legacy work, the rewriting of masculine DNA on earth. So that's why I keep talking about the novo masculine, the new divine masculine, and the material world. So the sacred king doesn't reject the material world, he sanctifies it. He understands that abundance and ambition and intimacy are not evil. They are sacred currents of creation when aligned with love. That's when our divine masculine approaches money as a tool for service, not domination. He approaches the S word as a ceremony of union, not conquest. He approaches ambition as a channel of purpose, not ego. And this integration is what distinguishes him to become the embodied master. He doesn't flee the world, he elevates it by presence. He walks in markets, in meetings, in a marriage with you, carrying heaven in his aura. So this is the divine feminine reward, us witnessing the real man. So for the divine feminines, witnessing the transformation is both awe-inspiring and humbling, because we remember who he was before, the guy who was like running away, saying not interested, saying I'll never ever talk to you again, and blocking on social media and whatever, right? The confusion, the withdrawal, the ego walls. And now when we see him standing in divine clarity, we understand it was never rejection, it was a metamorphosis. This is when we realize that every silent month, every painful goodbye, every heartbreak was part of this divine engineering. Our divine masculine was never abandoning us, he was being rebuilt for us. And when you do meet your divine masculine again, it's not just about reunion, it's recognition. You will see it in his eyes, the same soul that promised you lifetimes ago that he will find you when he remembers who he is. So, and this is the mission. Reunited in full embodiment, twin flames naturally shift from personal to planetary service. Our love becomes mission, our union becomes technology, and together we anchor light into systems that operated in shadow: relationships, corporation, governments, families. We transmit stability through presence alone. Our conversation becomes codes, our connection becomes a lighthouse for all those still lost in illusion. And this is the sacred marriage of heaven and earth, where our divine masculine is holding form and we, the divine feminine, we are flowing essence, together rebuilding the new frequency of new earth across the collective grid. So, signs you're witnessing the sacred king within your masculine. If your divine masculine is in this stage, you will feel it intuitively. You will notice his energy feels calm, not chaotic. His communication becomes consistent. His presence feels devotional, not performative. He no longer hides behind logic, he speaks from soul, and he honors us even from afar through his actions. And we won't need to chase proof because his frequency itself becomes the evidence. And that's when he's not in ego's last stand anymore, he's standing in truth. So this is the integration in the king and the monk. So the most evolved divine masculine integrates both aspects, the king and the monk. The king brings structure, vision, action. The monk brings humility, reflection, and grace. Together they form balance, worldly power guided by divine conscience. This is the embodiment of cosmic law. Action aligned with awareness, strength infused with surrender, desire purified through devotion. So our divine masculine no longer seeks to own the world, he seeks to serve the world. And through this service, abundance naturally follows. And this is when, as the divine feminine, the next initiation into receive our divine masculine without shrinking. Many divine feminines have prayed for their divine masculine's awakening, but when he returns fully embodied, we must be ready to meet him as equal. This means letting go of the savior identity. It means allowing our divine masculine to lead in consciousness while maintaining our sovereignty, It means standing together as partners of divine will, not teacher and student, not healer and wounded one, but twin flames finally united in frequency. That's when we become the queen who walks beside him, not beside him, walks beside him, not behind him. And together we can govern the shared field in love, grace, and mastery. So that's why it's a planetary ripple. Every divine masculine who returns as the sacred king sends shockwaves across the grid. Men who never believed in spirituality begin to question their own conditioning. Women who have been holding masculine burden begin to exhale. So that's why children born in this timeline inherit a more balanced earth. This is why our union matters, not just for us, but for humanity, because each awakening union is a node in the global light network, stabilizing Earth's ascension. The love we heal between our echoes into generations not yet born. So the return of our sacred king, our beloved divine masculine, is not about grandeur, it's about gentleness. The moment he chooses love over fear, integrity over image, truth over comfort, that's his coronation. And if you, the listener, feel this resonance rising within you, it means you're part of this collective change. Because every time we heal as divine feminines, every balanced decision, every act of forgiveness contributes to the resurrection of the divine order on earth. So take a deep breath, feel the crown of light above your head, and feel the heart of gold within your chest, and whisper this: our divine masculine will always come back. He will be released from the prison he has imprisoned himself in, and you'll be free to lead in love now. So again, guys, thank you. I was actually going to stop at part 2, but I thought, you know what, I'll just pull through and do part 3 as well. I know it's a long discourse, and I know some of you guys, in fact many of you guys, told me that you prefer longer discourses, so I hope you've enjoyed this one. So thank you for watching this 3-part The Ego's Last Stand, our divine masculine's rebirth, moving from collapse to resurrection to coronation, the full arc of divine remembrance. So if this teaching has stirred something within you, reflect, on your own journey. Is your divine masculine still fighting, awakening, or returning home? And wherever he is, honor him, because every resistance is sacred when seen through the eyes of love. So guys, with that, if you guys want to work one-on-one with me, you can book for a session via the link in the description. All my sessions are conducted via Zoom, one-on-one by me, so you can ask me all the questions during our session. So looking forward to seeing you guys, and I hope you've enjoyed this discourse. All right, take care, love you all, and talk to you all soon. And again, I hadn't posted in a couple of days. It was because of Deepavali, but I will resume posting every day again. All right, with that, see you all again. Bye bye.